Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Lozito, and we are here with Dr. Jeff Feinman, a veterinarian since 1985. And I'd like to tell a little bit about how we got together and came to the topic of the discussion that we're about to talk about today. And that is that both Jeff and I are homeopathic practitioners, and I am an animal communicator. Dr. Feinman is a veterinarian, and we came to know each other at a symposium where I was presenting about animal communication, and he was looking to share his experience with the community on the research of the reality of animals and their lives and how they can comprehend, how they can respond to energy, how they are equal spirits to humans. And that was the topic of the symposium. And Jeff and I have, branched off into a group of our own where we are advocates of holistic health. And I, the communicator, brought to the table an experience about the fact that I did not have the letters DVM after my name, and I personally was convinced that that carried so much power because I think that in our world, it actually does. And so, Jeff, if you want to take it from there.
And I'm sorry that I'm chuckling, but I too do not have the TVM letters after my name. Did you know that, Donna? I am not a TVM. I am a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania Vet School, where our degree is VMD. So, not sorry of the semantic. We can cut this out if you want. But yeah, um, but that was a really, really important point that you made. But I want to go back to the that you made at the Human Animal Spiritual Network meeting, which, by the way, was what, 5 or 6 veterinarians. There's a bunch of us on this committee, which is basically trying to get the paradigm that we're about to discuss, a little bit more mainstream. And well, as Donna mentioned, the discussion started with, looking at the credibility of a veterinarian versus a non-veterinarian. But I want to go back to 2 years ago in May when we met at the University of Saskatchewan. So a credible university, virtually. And it was a research conference on animal communication, on communication with the world, nature, the connection of us all. And I was there for a different reason than Donna, who was there as a communicator. I was there as a scientist and a molecular biologist from Penn. Um, that realized after a decade of conventional only veterinary work that was not truly helping my patients heal. It would get rid of symptoms temporarily, and something else would crop up, and inevitably they would get older and get sicker and have recurrent illnesses. And what I was taught in vet school just wasn't fixing it. And that may have been because I'm just not a good veterinarian, or everyone I know is just not a good veterinarian, but we are good at getting rid of symptoms. And what I learned over the years is that we have been focusing on physiological or the physical paradigm, been focusing on cellular function. Now, I, as a cell biologist who started my career as a university scholar in the veterinary medical scholarship training program, when they basically paid me to go to vet school. My beginning was in cellular biology and detecting the individuality of every cell. And I did not at all connect that or know about the energetic paradigm that we're talking about. But yes, and I don't want to make this too long, but that energetic paradigm starts with mitochondria in every cell that I was studying. It's what generates the consciousness, the aliveness of people, pets, and all of living beings in the world. And when I realized that it was that energy that was fundamental, that's what brought me to this conference that was about basically how that energetic connection is indeed the way that we can help the animals and the world better than focusing on individual symptoms or individual problems, when actually we have the answer and have had the answer for thousands of years via indigenous wisdom, which is all shows that the world is all interconnected, that the trees, that the plants, the animals, the people are all connected. And that's where communicators come in, like Donna and I, as a veterinarian, wanted to be able to employ that piece of the puzzle that we missed 100% in vet school. And what I was taught had nothing to do with that energetic connection that Donna is and other communicators are so awesome at focusing on. So here we as a group of veterinarians and a bunch of communicators all got together to discuss how we can help everyone else get connected with this paradigm that will allow us all to heal. So I believe that is where we start the discussion, which ended in the barn. That maybe Donna, you want to tell us a little more about the details about.
I think it's important to really get the visual on what happened that did bring this discussion about, and that was I was at a very conventionally oriented veterinary barn, and there was a problem with a horse that clearly a veterinarian couldn't figure out. When the woman was stuck on the trail, her horse just stopped, and no one could figure out what was going on with him because he never did it before in 30 years. So they finally asked me to ask the horse, and when I started to describe what the horse was saying and where it was hurting and the biomechanics of his structure, which was completely out of alignment, that, to carry 2,000 pounds on four little feet, that he just had gotten new shoes and then expected to walk on this compensated body. When I was explaining all of that, I could see in the eyes of the man that was listening that it was making total sense, and that he was getting ready to call the body worker, and but then they called the veterinarian, and the veterinarian just poo-hooed it and said, "That's not the problem. He has arthritis. He's fine. Continue to ride him." And my response to that was I was a little bit upset, because the reality of what was going on with that horse was completely ignored. And the veterinarian's word over that truth just took precedence. And I'd like to hear from you, Jeff. Why do you think that is, that the word of the veterinarian just wiped out whatever that guy was understanding about the common sense of what I was saying in the structure of that horse?
I think there may be down the two conversations here. One is why, in the bigger picture, we rely on the power of a doctor that went to Harvard over a doctor that went to another school that wasn't Harvard, or why we as credentialed veterinarians are relied on more than a dog trainer or communicator or other non-veterinarian. And I think we also have to look at that disconnect that we talked a little about before, because we live in a very different world, and our world is gonna frequently disagree with a more subjective, less conventional world. So had that individual been more oriented to listen to his intuition and his what he felt was right, he would have gone with what you said. But instead, his thinking mind took over, and he followed the conventional wisdom, and the conventional wisdom, by definition, is not going to be energetically oriented. So whatever you say, whatever I say as a veterinarian, that comes from a place of energy. Whatever I say is often discounted as well. It just so happens that what we're both talking about is now a huge um, area of interest in research and all being confirmed by books like, I mean, whether it's meditation or breathing, or yeah, or individuality, like the cellular individuality that we're now learning more about, the molecular individuality that is every person around. So I think that your barn guy, his mind just filtered out what you were saying because it wasn't mainstream. That's all that I'm saying. So if you're a veterinarian, yeah, you do have a little more credibility with some people, but I can tell you that more non-veterinarians have more social media interest than veterinarians by far.
Just quickly, Jeff, could you explain why it is that energy is so excluded in the education of in the schools, whereby they're not taught about nutrition, they're not taught about energy, they're not taught about the soul, they're not taught about anything that is actually concrete to life.
Well, I mean, you just contradicted yourself, because concrete is exactly the reason why we have not been studying it, because we don't have concrete ways of doing that, except when it comes to the soul or personality. They used to call psychology as soft science. We didn't get objective, concrete numbers that we could measure, like when we measure the exposome, when we measure molecular individuality. Just so happens that we are made up by mitochondria that can be measured. Mitochondria are the energy generators of our bodies, and they are going to be, and they are the bridge between the non-measurable energy that's all around us and the energy that basically makes the difference between life and death. And that's the fundamental disconnect that we're not seeing in vet school, is that energy is why everything else happens. Everything is secondary to that. It
Do you think that they
supplements the
do you think that they were aware of it and just leave it out, or do you think that it's an unknown as far as they're concerned?
That is a great question, and that brings me back to why did I study the best of the best for over a decade and not know about it? And why did I end up where we are right now having this discussion with you? And the answer, I think, to your question is curiosity, observation. He started, for various reasons, focusing only on what you can measure, of things right in front of you. And one of the things that we didn't look at was the mitochondria. We looked at the functioning of the cell and the way systems all work on an individual level, on a molecular level. Pretty much everything we're learning now is about how we can molecularly manipulate the things that are going on in our bodies. So bring me back on track, Donna. What was your question?
Do you think that it was deliberately
No, I think it was lack of natural curiosity. I think that because I mean, we all know that animals are getting sicker younger. I mean, when I was in vet school on rounds, if we had a young animal in the cage with an unknown disease, cancer was really low on the differential. Now it's pretty darn common and it's up there in the top three in young animals with unknown and serious symptoms. So the growing number of chronic diseases and cancer is evidence that there's something else going on that we're not fixing in the vet paradigm and with what we learn in vet school. And that is why I think we are where we are. And it's just now being reconnected in human medicine with people like Martin Picard that are studying stress, mitochondria, its consciousness, all the things that we're talking about at a mitochondrial level at Columbia University, school. They're not doing that in veterinary medicine yet. We're just now beginning to do some HA holistic actions, just beginning to work with the scientists in doing mitochondrial research in animals. But yeah, it's not funded and it's not really common knowledge. In a decade it will be.
and
That's guaranteed. I mean, because we'll get there eventually. That's one thing about the measurements. They often, if you keep a little bit of an open mind, they will often lead you to the answer. And that's why, I love homeopathy and everything that is basically based in what the body doesn't lie. I mean, symptoms are not going to lie to you about what you should do next. What is going to lie is maybe the artificial labels that you're putting on those symptoms or that you're calling it disease or you're limiting your possibilities. But anyway, we don't want to go there. We've already probably rambled on. I probably rambled on way too long. I hope we can edit this way down.
well, I think, to close, I think that, I'd like to hear your perspective on, one of the other topics that we had touched on briefly is a veterinarian who is actually at the crossroads of holistic medicine and, realizing that what they're doing is not exactly in the greatest interest of the animal. How would you advise someone in that position?
That is a great question. That brings us back to something we talked about at length before the recording, and that is money. So I think it's how the individual that feels the way that you're describing, and that individual probably has natural curiosity to go beyond what Dr. Gabor Mate calls the cult of medicine, or the cult of what we learn in vet school or medical school, which is basically, blunders from the reality of what's around. But if that person, that young person, had intuitively got through vet school and they still feel that, there's more out there, what are their student loans? How do they feel about not making that much money? Not being able to pay them back, what's the reality of day-to-day life? So what I would say is that it depends on how you feel about that economic situation. So if you're able to, uh, I don't know, Don. I don't have the answer. I mean, I think you have to follow your passion. I think you have to just do what you love the most. And that if you keep a truly open mind, what you need will come to you.
I think that's really great advice because, you follow your heart and it will take you where you need to go. Well, thank you for joining us. It was really very enlightening to hear your input on such up and coming topics. I think, intuition, heartfelt energy is really up for a revaluation in our culture, and the powers that be um, really is stems from the power within, and that will be realized eventually.
And those are beautiful words to end on. So thank you,
Thank you so
Donna.
much.
So what I am gonna do here is